Okay, the number 3 common pitfall for paragliders, frontals. Let's do a little math on paraglider maneuvers in general and just see what categories we have. We got asymmetric frontal, riser twist, tip stuck in, aka cravat, deep stall, spiral, spin. I think those are the maneuvers. That's all you got. That's good news. Some people imagine that there are just dozens. I think you can break them down into those 7. Deep stall, in case you don't know, is when you have a glider that's full of sand, full of snow, wet, old, out of trim, or over braked, aggravated into a condition where the glider is fully inflated above head but not flying. If you don't know about deep stall, put a study on it. We'll address that in another video. But that is one where the correct protocol is recognize, let off, hands up. If you go through the rest of them, then you only find one more that's hands up, and that's full frontal. And it even has some exceptions. So asymmetric, better do something. Frontal, hands up with some exceptions. Riser twist, it's time to start troubleshooting. Tip stuck, you have your work to do. Spiral, you have your work to do. Stall and spin are on the list and they're generally let off, but you have some posture elements to fix and some places to look and some general postures to take. So that one is very proactive as well. 15 years ago, a good buddy of ours came in to the sport, flying great, decided to go fly along the Wasatch here. Excellent flight, beautiful day. Innocent frontal happened. Whatever reason, mismanaged it, ended up on the side of the hill. No injury, no problem, but had to hike way down the mountain as the sun was going down. It was at that point that we couldn't help noticing that it was the frontal that was the problem for the more advanced pilots. The less advanced pilots would suffer the frontal, pop open on its own. They didn't know what happened. Glider surges out in front. Pilots that have been flying a long time or don't let that kind of thing happen as a policy feel really betrayed and feel like they really blew it when they have the frontal. And so they almost wish they could take it back. They almost wish they could rewind. And so they go for the brake to get it back open quick. And then they check the surge and then they get out of there. And all of that stuff can land you into a spin type or stall type configuration. And if you happen to be low, there's not room to fly away. As luck would have it, our buddy stopped flying paragliders and became world-class in another flying sport. Great move, but it was sad to see him go, and especially because the frontal got him that day because he was so good. Now we're on to full frontal. The big talk is going to be about how you let off and how letting off the brakes, letting the glider fly, getting it back in normal flight ends up being key. Recognize this is not the same protocol for all maneuvers. And that's one of the crux things that you can learn about these last 2 subjects. Frontal. We all know that paragliders will deflate when they are under braked. Pulling brake prevents deflations, and when you pull inadequate amounts of brake and you fly in correspondingly turbulent air, then the glider will at random, frontal or asymmetric, there's no particular rhyme or reason to which one will manifest, the air just decides. If it's a frontal, you'll take the cue quite easily because the glider will drop behind you. So at that moment, then you know to wait to fall under it. And it's important to put a study on what the intuition tells you at that point. It says, uh-oh, I did something wrong. And then, uh-oh, it's folded under. And then, uh-oh, it's coming back above head. And then, uh-oh, it's out in front. I should brake it. And then, uh-oh, I should have pulled more brake and that wouldn't have happened. And uh-oh, I gotta get out of here. This air is turbulent. So you get about 5 or 7 reasons to pull brake in response to the frontal. And the truth is it doesn't need it. When we have people pull frontals over the lake, it's largely a yank down hard, release quick. And 9 times out of 10, the glider opens, starts to surge out in front. We coach the pilot hands up, even though it's not intuitive. Glider restarts, they fly away. The only exceptions are if it opens with big ears, you ignore the big ears. It's very tempting to pump them out. Ignore the big ears, get the center to fly, hands up again, let the center fly, and as the center flies, the tips oftentimes work themselves out. There are some documented cases where some higher end gliders will frontal and then not open on their own. Pop quiz, what's the first thing to check if you have a frontal and it doesn't open on its own? Just see if you might be on the gas still. Many times, 8 times out of 10, somebody has a sticky frontal. It's because they forgot to let off the speed bar when the deflation happened. As soon as they do, oftentimes it'll open up. There are some gliders where it does demand a quick pump to open the glider, but after that, hands up, let the glider surge, make sure it flies away. If it doesn't, if there's a delay, hands up, maybe slide the hands behind the A risers, gently bend them forward. That's called tweaking the A's, and you can put a study on it. If your foot was on the speed bar to start with, it might still be there. You could give a little push to make sure the glider gets going again. But the most insidious thing about a frontal is that the pilot's intuition is to overbrake it, and you can end up in deep stall. And deep stall can lead to spin, and sometimes the recoveries are a little messy. And as much as the acro pilots love deep stall, play around with it all day long, for the average pilot, that extended descent in the parachutal mode and the aggravated brake inputs can create a downward vector. And when you finally do let off, then sometimes you can suffer a big surge. So that's where some people will say, you need to break the surge out of a frontal. And it's like, yes, you do need to break the surge out of a frontal if it's the result of a long and extended deep stall. On your normal frontal, if things are happening on the normal timeline, deflate, pop open, surge, I have rarely, if ever, seen a glider that recovered and then surged to another full frontal. That's how little they surge. And so as a maneuvers coach, I would always caution a pilot, yes, use your intuition, use your good sense of things that you developed over the years, but if ever there was a time to be light on the brakes, it's right after the full frontal. And after that, go back to your good, diligent brake pulling. The better pilot you are, the longer you've been flying, the better you kite, the less intuitive it will be and the less natural it will be for you to let off, especially in this moment where inadequate brake precipitated a deflation. So we always tell the story that X, Y, or Z pilot was just on a long cross country flying 2 or 3 hours, all sorts of gnarly places, feeling the brakes nicely, got in a low place, got in a rotorized place, got in a turbulent place, took a frontal. Glider opened, it was time to let it fly. When it's time to let off and let the glider fly, deep back in that canyon next to some big rocks at your worst moment of the day, it's kind of a hard thing to do, and it has to be trained. And that's why we go to the lake and we have people knock down frontal after frontal after frontal after frontal so that it's intuitive and that at that one moment during the day, they can go hands up in response to that event, get back underway, and then guess what? Just get back to feeling the brakes. Don't let it happen again. That's full frontal.